My name is Brian Martin. For those of you that don't know me already, for those of you that know attrition, not that Brian Martin.
Oh.
We do know each other, but not that guy. He's scary. I own Liticode, which used to be known as Digital Trust. We got sued, had to change the name. Now we have this cool logo. It doesn't really matter, but that's the name change in case you're wondering what the heck happened there. We're a forensics company. We deal primarily with litigation, which makes the topic all the more funny because we're used to dealing with EEOC and medical malpractice. And people are like, OSINT, how does that factor into everything? OSINT is in everything. OSINT is open source intelligence, if you didn't already know, which would be surprising. But the stuff is everywhere. Anybody red team? Nobody's red team? Okay, red team uses this stuff constantly. It's stage one of your attack, right? Go out and get as much information as you can about the company, figure out where the computers are, what the names are, what the user lists are, blah, blah, blah. Everything that you can get from the outside without alerting them to your activities. Blue team uses it too, kind of in reverse. Hey, who the heck is attacking? And they want to know more about it, put together different bits of information to figure out who's attacking. So this stuff shows up everywhere. We use it in putting together profiles about the people involved in the lawsuits. We may want to know more about an expert on the other side. We may want to know more about who is involved in the lawsuits on the other side as a way to gain advantage because information is power. My allergies are kicking my butt, so if I can't breathe and I cough, I'm fine. We'll get through it. If I fall over, by all means, call somebody. But it's just allergies. The usual disclaimers, not a lawyer. What else is there to say? You can read the slide, right? Don't use anything you learn here, not that there's all that much to learn. It's mostly about, well, you'll see as we go through it. But we're not going to teach you how to hack the kernel. We're going to talk about hacking the kernel. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, back. Am I like mic'd up? So we're going to go through it in terms of almost like a history. Start at the beginning, spend a couple slides on history stuff. There's really cool stuff. OSINT, in case you're not familiar, this stuff has been around forever. Since the first caveman crossed a ridge into the next valley and saw the next tribe and went, they look better fed than we are. I wonder what they're doing. Took off on their hunting trails to figure out where the best sheep were or whatever. Anyways, it's just knowledge. It's just what sort of intelligence can I get my hands on to give me an advantage over the competition. We're going to talk about aggregates, all the stuff here on the list. Again, one of the key things that I was liking about this was I'm going to tell you about employment opportunities. But if you all have jobs, it's going to be a little bit value. But take it back to your interns and say, hey, intern, you're interested in this kind of stuff. You can actually work in this field as a professional instead of just as a red teamer where it's like a side piece of what you do on an everyday basis. Okay, so what is it? OSINT specifically is the information that is available to us publicly. It's stuff that we can get our hands on. In old school terminology, it's our newspapers, our books, our radio publications, broadcasts, things like that. As such, historically, OSINT was not as easy to deal with as it is to us today. When we think of OSINT today, we think of, what can I Google? But in the traditional sense, it's what can I glean information-wise from your local newspapers that are written in your local language, that have your local idioms, which means I have to have an intelligence apparatus so that I can have people that can understand your language well enough to be able to grasp and glean the information that's contained in those sources. Which, that's why we have the CIA, and that's why we have the NSA. This was a huge aspect of what they did. They didn't really consider it OSINT as precise to them, it was just intelligence. OSINT came about fairly recent terminology, but the concept has always been there. Now we've got access to modern technology, we've got radio traffic, the internet, everything that you guys think of, including business publications, legal publications, government publications, the stuff just goes on and on and on. And the complexity of it is one of the things that makes it so much fun to deal with. Because it's almost like if you can get enough information sources, you can know almost anything. But getting them is the trick. And of course, social networking sites, how can I forget LinkedIn? I'm sure we all get 1 or 2 hits a month from Natasha. What was the name of the profile on LinkedIn, the girl that was hitting everybody up?
Robin Sage.
Sage. Okay. So the intelligence collection occurs whenever we go and we pull information. The thing that separates modern OSINT and just OSINT in general from traditional intelligence work is how hard you have to work to get it. If it's legal for you to get it, if it's easy, if it's exposed, it's open. If it's not exposed, that's traditional intelligence work. You're stealing information. The gray area is where things get interesting. If it's a closed LinkedIn group and you have to claim to be a CISSP to gain admittance, but you're not a CISSP, is it OSINT? It depends on who you work for as to how they do that kind of stuff. You're presenting a false front. You're fraudulent in what you're doing, which makes it really easy as people who are skilled in certain dark arts with computers to find yourself in a place that you shouldn't be in because it was there and you wanted the information. Back in the day, if you happened to access AT&T computers using default passwords that were available in manuals that you found in the dumpster, it's not OSINT, right? That's obviously what we call hacking today. But for crying out loud, it's the default passwords. If you owned that system and accessed another system using that same stuff, it's still not OSINT, but you're getting into this area where, yeah, it's common knowledge. What happens when the information is exposed by somebody else? For example, Ashley Madison. That's definitely not OSINT to begin with. But once that database is out there and available, you're still using criminal goods. They're still obtained through criminal act. So it's still not clearly OSINT, but the stuff is out there for you to make use of, whether it's legal or not. I'm talking to lawyers, lawyer. But the stuff is out there now. It's like saying I'm not going to include a password list in my dictionary file because it was obtained illegally and stuck on pasted in. The information's out there for you to use. Whether or not you use it depends on who you are and what you're doing, but there are things that are OSINT and there are things that are not, and you need to understand the difference before you start making use of them in the public eye, because it can land you in a lot of hot water. Okay, enough of overwhelming. One of my favorites, tools to use for this is FOCA. Anybody else like FOCA? Really? No FOCA users. This stuff is bomb. It still works. You point FOCA at a website, and it just digs documents out. And then it grabs those documents that they were kind enough to put on the internet for you, and it pulls out the metadata. So you can point it at an organization and get a list of user IDs, get a list of network resources. If you haven't played with FOCA, play with FOCA. It's a lot of fun. So what makes OSINT special is the things that you can do with it. And this is where having a creative mindset, and imagination, and the talent for this sort of stuff will pay off in spades. Using this information for gain is very easy. Well, it's easy and it's not easy. It's a funny field to be in. On the one hand, we don't know exactly how much OSINT is generating as a field right now, but we know it's like upwards of $5 billion a year. Who's our biggest user of this stuff? Anybody? There are little towns south of here, big roads and white buildings. Right? Half the intelligence community specializes in OSINT. And companies come and companies go. But this is a fantastic field to be in terms of opportunity. You take the stuff that you dig out of the internet, like Professor Bob here, and you put the stuff together, and now you're in possession of a piece of information that's not plainly available. Professor Bob is now going to work at the Savannah Research Facility. If I'm into the intelligence community proper, that's a potential asset for me to take. If I'm at the Savannah facility or work for the feds, that's an asset I need to be watching. But he is a piece of information to be traded by various interested parties. One of the things that comes up regularly in the intelligence community, and this is a former military, it's curious, is military changes. A local newspaper that has a military base in their town will publish an article about housing going up for sale, tracts of land being purchased by the military base, what have you, some little piece of information that does not plainly say the 5th Cavalry Division is moving here. But that's going to be the end result. And if you know that information ahead of time, you can make moves based on that. For example, I could buy a property. If I know the government's putting in an airstrip here, I know they're going to need this land. I can buy that for less money now than I can after they're already here. I wouldn't have any reason to buy them once they're already here. That's a commercial profit off of something the government's doing. But if you're the Russians, and you find out that we're closing a nuclear facility, that's important information to you. We didn't come out and put it in USA Today. We're closing Barksdale Air Force Base, but we may be moving parts of it. Little bits of information that show up in the newspaper are regularly used. That's why the intelligence community gets all of those papers from overseas and has translators to turn them into real information that goes into their computers, which then they can't read because their computers suck. We're better at that stuff. So it's about mining the information, because if you're not going to get paid for this stuff, it's no good, right? Billions and billions of dollars is spent on this. We're geeks. We can be really good at this stuff, really effective, and turn it into crazy for-profit companies that put it out to the Beltway and make enormous amounts of money, or we can sell it to commercial interests. But this stuff isn't always spooky. It's not always the government, although they are the primary driver. As I mentioned, there are commercial interests. Lately, in the last couple centuries, with the growth of big business, and this goes back to the expansion of the colonialism era, British shipping interests, business competitors, primarily in that vein, think pirates and stuff. What's the best intelligence a pirate can get? The fact that the ship contains gold, as opposed to wool. You know, if you're a pirate and you hit a ship and it contains wool blankets, you're like, yay, we live in the tropics. If it contains gold, then you're a really happy pirate. That's intelligence. Pay spies, classic intelligence, or just get it through newspaper publications, what have you. But the stuff has a commercial aspect to it. Everybody's heard of industrial espionage, right? We may not know what Elon Musk is going to make his next generation of batteries out of, but if we know that he is going down to Bolivia to talk to some people about land in the salt flats, we can be pretty sure that it's going to involve lithium, and we can act on that information commercially. We can block his move as a hostile company. We can take advantage of it and intercede to try and gain some financial advantage from it. It's hard to really explain without concrete examples, which of course you can't give. But classic intelligence is going into the hotel in Paris and stealing the laptops of the Ford executives during the auto show. That's classic intelligence. Open source intelligence is looking at designs that they're showing in the car shows in NEMA, looking at publications and extrapolating what the next model series is going to be about. There's actually stuff in the Sun Tzu, The Art of War, about using spies and intelligence. So it goes back as far as we can think. The last 20 years, though, well, we'll get to that in the next slide. You can use it for personal stuff, checking on the backgrounds of the person you're dating. Yes?
About 20 years ago, or maybe a little less. I used to hear the term data mining all the time. How does OSINT differ from data mining? Has the name just changed, or is it?
They're similar functions. OSINT uses open intelligence. Like you wouldn't data mine newspapers. You would data mine a Google database of newspapers. Data mining is the technical process of dealing with the databases, but OSINT is where are these databases, what do they contain, are they actual newspapers, databases? It's the intelligence aspect of it, which includes data mining, but isn't necessarily data mining. For example, let's talk about aggregate chip. We'll come back to that later and see if we can clarify some more for you. And of course, government and business are always tied. Good old Halliburton is a good example there. Intelligence gathering collection was mostly static. I mean, since the printing press up until the 60s, there hadn't really been any improvements in the process. You sent spies to get newspapers, to do translations, to put stuff together, to steal data, or to steal design plans, what have you, traditional intelligence. And then we got computers, then we got the printing press. And we had that leap forward of, instead of verbal observation or physical observation, now we've got the printing press, we can mine the data out of that. And as technology has brought us forward in time, the curve for OSINT has gotten steeper and steeper, and the processing has gotten faster and better, et cetera, et cetera. The last 20 years has seen an explosion of this stuff around the Beltway, companies popping up left and right to do this. What's interesting about it is that it's sort of gone back a step. Our domestic enemies of a number of countries don't use technology to a great degree, so you need native speakers to do this sort of open source intelligence. You need people on the ground collecting the intelligence instead of just running Google source. But it's still the same process, it's still the same stuff. Now we've got more technology. You can do amazing things with just the computers and the stuff that they give you. For example, FOCA, Maltego, all of the tools that we use in terms of penetration testing and security work all contribute to this, and we feed each other's discipline on a regular basis. Where we used to have to know the language for a while there, it seemed like we wouldn't have to. Technology was going to be a great benefit to us. Oracle had translators, Google had translators, and then in the intelligence community they said, yeah, you guys are doing a bang up job, we love all the lights, but you're missing the finer points of the discussion. We need native speakers. And that's really hard to do with computers because dialects change, slang changes. I mean, just in the US alone, the slang that crosses YouTube on a monthly basis changes. So how are you going to deal with gangs, MS-13 coming up from South America, talking about stuff on public forums for Halo that involves drug trafficking if you can't manage the dialect? So there's a certain encoding there that requires native speakers, people who are traditional spy types. But there's still room for this stuff. For starters, if it's in a chat room and you can collect it and then give it to that person, they don't necessarily have to participate directly. So technology is wonderful. One of the downsides of the physical process, of course, that makes OSINT, and in particular the electronic, so desirable, is that physical assets are expensive. They also have a shelf life. They also have a lifespan. One of my relatives worked in one of the TLAs and told me at one point that the lifespan of an undercover agent over in Europe was approximately 8 weeks. It didn't mean you got killed or anything, it just meant that they could use you for 8 weeks and then they had to pull you out because now you were a known person to the other side. That's a lot of training, a lot of effort to go to for 8 weeks of work. And then they pull them back and put them in Langley or someplace, but still, that's a lot of investment to get 8 weeks of collection out of an asset. Whereas OSINT, we can all sit in our cubicles and run Google all day long and yay, get paid. And no one's going to shoot us. Well, actually, that's not quite true. So the last 20 years have been insane. We have no idea how good it is. what's classified. We see these buildings going up around the Beltway, and we know they're doing intelligence work, but we don't know what it is because they won't talk about it. The fact that 150,000 people with security clearances just got pink slips is very interesting. I don't know what they were in, but the job market in intelligence is probably going to be a little hard to get into right now. Anyways, off track. So because of technology, we have fewer local papers to read. How many people had a newspaper in their town shut down? I know I had a couple go under. And what remains now is primarily driven through electronics. We'll probably have a skeleton staff remaining that does local news, but you've lost a lot of content. The obituary, the quality in the obituaries, the quality of the local announcements, a lot of stuff has gone downhill, meaning that technology has degraded that asset, and it hasn't shifted to the web, right? It's just vanished. Those feature articles on Mary Lou's Peach Cobbler just went away. I mean, she might blog about it now, but there's not an asset of the newspaper running it now. So there's the changes in the intelligence, and in particular how OSINT works, have been extensive during our lifetime. One other interesting aspect of how technology has influenced this is that because we can do everything better, faster, cheaper, the disinformation ability has gone through the friggin' roof. It used to be that disinformation was an inconvenience. You had people that would come up to you and ask you if you knew who had killed Kennedy, or that the moon landing was fake, or some of the silliness that goes on like that. Right? That's disinformation. It's not purposeful disinformation, except for the guy who's selling the book to you at the convention of nut jobs that tells you who killed Kennedy. But it's still disinformation. But if you frequent Twitter or you frequent Facebook, you see this stuff going by constantly. Boycott so-and-so, write your congressman about so-and-so, this guy's fake, this guy's a fraud. I don't want to get into these specifics, but we've seen politics and so on. All of the political parties use this stuff constantly to try and discredit each other, to try and blow up their own candidate. They use these OSINT sources for political means. They use these OSINT sources for government means, and they use them for commercial means. If I happen to be an electric car manufacturer discrediting another manufacturer by talking about how their cars keep blowing up or accelerating, that would be of interest to me because it would increase my market share. I wouldn't say for certain that the Toyota fiasco was perpetuated by a machine for disinformation, but I'd say it's a distinct possibility. If the way we phrase this when we're doing red team stuff is, you're paying me $100,000 or $50,000 to red team your company. Why wouldn't I take a $1,000 iPhone and hand it to one of your executives as a write-off present? It's $1,000 out of the job, and it gets the job done. Why wouldn't I do that? If you're talking millions of dollars in the auto community, why wouldn't I give a company $1 million to run a disinformation campaign on your best-selling vehicle? It just makes business sense. It's just another form of marketing. It's bad, it's evil, but it's just business. The stuff is going on. We know industrial espionage is going on. That's a sort of different topic, but the stuff is out there and it's available, and it's gone crazy, just like with the government. When you have a bunch of people in D.C. who no longer have a job, who are they going to sell to? The commercial world. I mean, there's already people who just focus on the commercial world. Why? Because you don't have to have a security clearance. Maybe you're evil by nature and you can't get a security clearance. You still want to work in intelligence to make money. This does it for you. Hopefully that wasn't too crazy. The classic on the internet, nobody knows your dog. Internet intelligence is wonderful stuff. Not much good. But of course, with the disinformation comes the problem of understanding what pieces of information you have that are fake. Everybody knows what honeypot is, right? What's a honeypot? It's disinformation. It's an opportunity to learn about the enemy without exposing your key assets. The funny thing about information is that when you ask for information from a source, whether it's Google or a Russian native or your Congress people in a hearing, when you ask them for information, you are giving them intelligence. You are telling them something about what it is you're after. So there's layers to this that makes the intelligence game so much fun. One of the reasons I like it is that there's information, there's disinformation, and then there's other information about what you're doing. Information on the internet has problems just because there's so much of it out there. So people perpetuate stuff and it rolls over and it gets copied and pasted and stolen. And you can't Google a topic without getting back 75% garbage. Google's trying their best to make that kind of stuff go away, but it's out there. So there's limitations on how much you can use things like Google for your intelligence work. But you can do it manually. If you know where your targets are, you can use FOCA, you can use Multimedia, you can go out there and mine that stuff yourself. It's slower, it's more tedious until you write a tool to do it. So it's the Pentagon. Remember me when that happens, please. The difference between modern data mining and intelligence collections with all of this technology is the leverage. Before I had to have an asset, it was a very slow process. Now I can use essentially the mechanical Turk, right? I can turn loose 100 red teamers who have no idea what it is I'm asking them to do to collect little bits of information and pull together a piece of open source intelligence for me without exposing the asset. We don't even want to get into the layers about who's doing what to whom and how it all ties together, but if you're not careful when you do that, like say I just gave the information out to a single person, that person can now sell the fact, they can tell that information to somebody else because information about information. It's crazy. The intelligence is fun. I love it. But you can do more with technology faster. For example, when we were doing some research for this topic in another place, we were using FOCA, we were using, heck, we used Nessus for some of it. You can be one person sitting at a keyboard doing this work by hand, or you can write a script and do it all for you. Almost everything is scriptable, right? So if you can do it with a tool, you can do it 100 times with a tool even better. So there's leveraging that goes on that makes it fun, which is why people write the tools. The fun aspect of it from the DC portion is it cost effective? If I use all of this technology to go get this little piece of information and it cost me $100,000, would it have been better to use an asset that I had in the field to break him off for a half a day to just go steal it for me? Which one's more cost effective? That's for the boys in DC to decide. From a commercial aspect of it, if I'm selling this to General Motors as something, it's just dollar figures. If it's cheaper for me to send you to Detroit to go get that information the old-fashioned way, that's what I'm going to go with because it's all about money in commercial. The concept of meta-intelligence brings us the thing I was hinting at before, where when you ask a question, you have conveyed information. It's one of those areas where you start thinking about it, your brain just goes rapidly down this drain hole of, well, if I'm telling you this and you're asking for this and this and that, the other thing, pretty soon we've got layers and layers and layers of intelligence trying to do analysis, and at some point somebody's got to stop. That sort of thing is great for automation and rule sets and AI, not AI, expert systems. Sorry, I misspoke. You can, for example, build a data center in Utah and essentially copy the internet, and then you can run whatever the hell query you want. Nobody can be the wiser unless they've got an actual spy in your organization. This was actually a problem for a while. We had intelligence assets that were using Google, and they were using AOL, and they were using places like that to do data mining, and it was showing up. Because what happens when you start typing a search on Google? How do I find Halle Berry photos? How do I find Pentagon photos? And it auto-populates the search based on what other people are asking. But when you're asking about some really obscure city in Siberia and nuclear assets or something, There's only 3 of you asking that question, so you're going to see that on the list. I don't think he does that anymore, but that was a known problem for a while. I assume everyone's reading the slides, so that's why there's no text on them, but I don't want to read the slides, it's a bad habit. So some interesting sources for this stuff, in case you haven't played in this field at all. The opensource.gov. This is a government website devoted to open source information that you can get access to. It's almost like the publications from the Library of Congress that circulate. If you get those, if you qualify, and now it's a lot harder to gain access, they actually want you to be affiliated with the government somehow, or the British government or any of our allies. But it's not too terribly hard. For example, if you work at an intelligence sort of company or forensics company, you generally can get access. If you're in InfraGard, I don't know if it depends on what mood they're in that day, but that's the government's portal to open source intelligence. It does not work as well as it used to. They've dumbed it down. Everything goes into the secret thing now. The government has a nasty habit of collecting OSINT and producing something that is entirely OSINT, for example, the Hawaii report. And then once they get it together, they look at it and they go, oh, shit. And they classify it and they take it off the net. We worked a case with a transportation agency, and they wanted to know if certain things were possible that would lead to a mass casualty incident. And we went data mining, and we found a published report from a government agency about the exact sort of mass casualty incident they were talking about, and it was available on the net for anyone to download, and the ability to duplicate it and act on it was very, very low, which meant that if a bad actor had found that, they could have gone, holy cow, this is awesome, go get me some copper cable. And that would have been the end of that. They could have repeated it a number of times and it would have been really ugly. And so we told them about it, and about a month later, of course, that source vanished. Thankfully, why was it ever out there in the first place? Because risk management and classification are 2 things that are difficult to do. Everybody makes mistakes at it. It's just like finding a sales brochure with next year's pricing on a website for a company. Everybody makes mistakes. One of the reasons why this field will never get old is that there's humans involved in it. So just like security and pen testing, all of that, we have employment for a long time. The Hawaii report was really cool. Go get a copy of it. It's still on the network, whatever. Open source, Shodan, Google, or Scout website. These are sources of information, as opposed to tools, pure tools like Floco, Multigo, that let you manipulate this sort of stuff. And that is by no means any sort of lengthy source. At the end of the presentation, there's a long list of source material that you won't look at there. Okay, aggregate intelligence, we talked about this, pulling stuff together, huge aspect of OSINT. Can have lots of value depending on who you are. This stuff is basically limited to your imagination. I mean, if you want to corner a market in some sort of commodity, whether it's houses or peaches, this stuff is valuable. It just depends on what you can leverage. However, be careful what you do, because when you're talking about messing with other people's livelihoods, bad things can happen. We have found stuff in our efforts that we have quickly deleted. And it's, every time I explain this stuff, I tell you about this. One of the things that we thought of a long time ago, about 6 years ago, was we went through a briefing with the feds, and they told us how human trafficking happens and what they see in terms of the physical world when human trafficking comes to town. When they move in, when they move on, what happens? Things like they go to Costco and they buy paper towels by the pallet. that they buy certain brands of condoms by the pallet, by the case. Things which, if you have access to data mining technology, make it very, very easy to figure out where the human traffickers are, where the human traffickers are about to go into business, and where they've been. That's, to me, as a human being on the planet, that's awesome information. We need to go close those people down. But we don't want to call attention to ourselves because, you know, I was like, well, why don't we run this on our hometown and see what's going on? Because we knew there was some stuff there. But you don't want Vlad showing up on your doorstep with a shotgun to remind you that he doesn't want to be exposed. When you're talking about exposing criminals through knowledge, you've got to understand that criminals are not nice people. Well, it turns out that governments are not nice people either. And if you go data mining and you look at government websites and you find out that there are documents there that list their intelligence assets in the field, what we call a knock list. What they call a knock list, I don't have a knock list. Which is basically your undercover assets in the field. But it's not in the form of a single document, which would be what was in the James Bond movie a decade, 15 years ago. I forget, but anyways, knock list. What was that?
Mission Impossible.
Mission Impossible. This was a distributed set of materials, and it had all of their intelligence assets in the field. We knew where everybody on the planet was. And we stopped doing that really fast because we didn't want to call attention to ourselves. That's the sort of bad things that you can find when human beings make mistakes with data. Now, admittedly, you had to go and look at the documents and figure out which documents and where, and it took going and using Google and using Foca and using a couple different things and pulling some script together to get it all to boil down to, hey, look, I've got a knock list for this large government. But they're dangerous, so we just deleted everything and forgot about it. But the stuff is out there. Were we being drama queens to be so panicked about it? I don't know. The intelligence community, and when you're getting into that level of sensitive information, I don't know. Just be careful if you get a bug in your hat to go digging in government sites that you're messing with the government, and they do things. So one of the things in the field that isn't really talked about is the fact that the people who pickpocket are not really fond of the people at Google. And the people at Google think that the people that pickpocket are a waste of time, but in reality there's not that much bias. But it shows up, ironically, more often at the management level than it does at the agent level. Because we all like to make fun of each other, red versus blue, geeks versus spies. But in management, they're talking about budget dollars and proof and what makes me look good to management. And they have a tendency to minimize open source intelligence because it's not as useful. Bias. They think that if they steal a fact using an asset, that it is more actionable, more factual than if we put that same information together using Google. When they do OSINT, they will frequently use another source to confirm it. I'm all for confirmation. I think that's a good business practice. It adds to expense. But dismissing OSINT out of hand, which is one of the things that happens in certain government circles, depending on management, it always comes back to management. They dismiss the stuff out of hand. I think there's a huge waste because there's a lot of value there. We know there's value because we've seen it. This means that if you're a company selling this stuff to a certain government agency and the director of that arm changes, and the new guy coming in is more or less favorable to how you do business, your time, or your boats can live, your boats can live, no matter what it is. Business can improve, or you can find yourself with a pink slip. Ask all the people looking for work in DC right now. But studies have shown that there's a lot of effectiveness here. So one of the things that is a strange question in the community is, well, if we know it's effective, why aren't we using this stuff all the time? I don't know. That's, yeah. You thought we were going to get through this whole presentation without pictures, didn't we? Oh, wait. Of course, as I mentioned, because of the level of disinformation, the quantity of players on the internet, there's a huge signal-to-noise ratio, which means opportunity. If you can write an algorithm that will dig through Twitter and pull out the crud, or use Maltego to figure out which people are running which accounts so that you can shut them off and narrow down your information sources, you're refining your information set, you're providing value, you can make a lot of money. Of course, because technology changes so fast and we go from Twitter to Snapchat to Facebook to Xbox One messaging, you're constantly shifting your information sources from one platform to another, or you're writing a huge one that sits out in the desert in Utah and sucks all of that stuff in all the time, but they still contract with people, I'm sure, to bring in new modules when new stuff shows up. I mean, wouldn't you want to be the guy that goes to the CIA and says, hey, you know that new social networking thing that's over on Peru that everyone started using? I've got a plug-in for your machine. Here you go. That'll be $1 million, please. So most of the organizations, for example, we went back after a couple of years and digged down a couple of the sources that we had found some interesting stuff on, including the one that was a government agency. And we're glad to see that they had buttoned up their trousers and were no longer exposed to the world. However, it comes and goes. Everybody makes mistakes. And a company that was formerly clean of interesting information can suddenly be rife with it. And hopefully they'll pay you to help them solve that problem. But it's a vigilance thing. You have to keep going with this stuff. Just like security, you can't put a firewall in place and go, oh, we're secure. It goes on and it never ends, which is good for our careers. So, for those of you looking to get into the community, here is the Splat.business plan. It's really, really easy. Design a tool, sell the tool, bank the money, go back and do it again. So you can retire in a career, you can retire. I mean, come on, when they're valuing things like Twitter and Facebook in billions and billions of dollars, there's money to be made in this stuff. Infinite possibilities. Some more people came in. Is anybody else a student here? Students? Any more of you? No? Okay. So we won't talk too much about that. Private political interests. Everybody knows who Karl Rove is, right? Karl Rove has a huge data machine. Well, it goes up and down in size, but the man knows how to play with it. I assume everybody else has the same interest now after the humiliation that he dealt out in that one election. Obama had a huge information machine. It went away with his election, and then it formed a private company. And probably doing the same thing for other people now. There was an article in Wired in the past month or two about that political machine and how they were moving into commercial interests to do this for people like General Motors. Okay, the aspect of this that we always have to be careful with is general harm. The obvious one is the Ashley Madison database. That created some harm. That was not OSINT, but it is now. When you find stuff and you expose it, thanks Snowden, people can lose their lives. If it's military grade stuff, people can really lose their lives. If it's not military grade stuff, people can still suffer. We don't want to cause suffering, well maybe some people do. But if you're doing this stuff, do it for money and give your money, or give the findings to the company that is paying for you. If you're doing this for your own edification and you want to publish the results, think really carefully before you do. Think a lot about anonymizing it. If you don't know how to do that, get help. Don't just dump this stuff to paste bin, because you may find yourself on the receiving end of a lawsuit. And as people that deal with lawsuits as our daily job, you do not want that to happen. Lawsuits are terrible. police findings with care, let sleeping dogs lie. The Snowden thing is one of the most obvious. I mean, stuff is still coming out that the international tension. What's the other kid that dumped all the data?
Chelsea Manning, formerly known as Bradley Manning.
I'm not going to say it was good or bad. I'm just going to say that's a lot of information to put on the open market and not be ready for what happens. Of course, the U.S. government was never done. Would have been a problem. Ignorance is not bliss. We see daily, on my feed at least, Shodan notifications from Dan Teller about, hey, look what I found on Shodan today. And that's a lot of fun. Weekly data exposures, they're constantly churning out stuff from secrets and leaks from the government side of things. There's a great source code data. No, can't do that. After this is over, I'll look it up for anybody that's interested at the end. The source for some of the intelligence that we look at. So, if you want a career in this is actually one of the interesting fields in security and intelligence that you can get into as an entry level. One of the problems with forensics and security is that there's not a lot of entry level positions. You go in as a sysadmin, you go in as a network admin, you go in as a programmer, and then you start getting into security and forensics. You can go to work in intelligence today, doing next to no technical work, as a flunky that has to sort through stuff, as a coder that has to write interfaces, or as somebody with a genuine intelligence background and interest. I mean, there's lots of opportunity there if you want to go that way. We like it. It's not even our primary business. There's commercial clients, government clients. There's no academic programs for it. It doesn't have. Never mind. Don't have to have a degree, don't have to have a clearance. It's used by the security people since this is BSides. We're all familiar with security to one extent or another. Red teams use it extensively, blue teams use it extensively. It's a way to get into those teams and companies doing something that is less demanding than some of the more advanced steps. You could provide this for a service for a number of companies. We outsource some of our intelligence collection to a number of people who are bored in the evening. And instead of playing Halo, they go do our FOCA runs or our Multigo runs, and they put together the aggregate data for us, give us a report that we then plug back into the machine to go do the rest of the security work. Okay, the rest of this is biblio that you can't read. It doesn't matter until you get slides. Those are all of the sources that were used for this presentation. Don't plagiarize, right?